Welcome to HOA Citation Circus. She wanted a scapegoat, and she picked me. You are going to pay for this. That is what Linda Carver yelled at me in the clubhouse parking lot while jabbing her finger toward the open door of the storage closet. I had just pulled up to drop off some paint supplies for a fence repair when she came storming out, clipboard in hand, face red, voice loud enough to echo off the brick wall. She was not asking questions. She was accusing. She said I took a stack of blank violation forms from the office without permission, and now the board could not process complaints. I tried to tell her I had not even been inside the storage room that week, but she cut me off and said the security log showed my access card was swiped yesterday at 3 in the afternoon. I work as a property maintenance supervisor here at Sunset Ridge Community Association in Raleigh, North Carolina, so my card gets me into most common areas, but I was off-site with a vendor yesterday afternoon, and I had the receipts to prove it. Linda did not care. She said the card does not lie and I needed to return the forms immediately, or she would file a formal complaint with management and block my package deliveries until the issue was resolved. That last part made my stomach drop because I have a standing medical supply order that gets delivered here twice a month, and my next shipment was due in 2 days. I asked her to show me the log. She flipped through some pages on her clipboard and said the printout was back in the office, and I could review it during the hearing if I filed an appeal. I said I should not need an appeal because I did not take anything. She smiled this tight, cold smile and said, "I am speaking for the community, and the community expects accountability." Then she turned and walked back toward the clubhouse entrance, calling over her shoulder that I had until end of business Friday to return the forms, or the complaint would be filed automatically. It was Wednesday. I stood there next to my truck trying to process what just happened. Sunset Ridge is a lakefront neighborhood with strict guest rules and a gate, and Linda has been the board president for 3 years. She loves rules, she loves enforcement, and she loves making examples out of people she thinks are not following protocol. I called my buddy Marcus, a contractor who does HVAC work for half the homes in the community, and told him what happened. He was quiet for a second. Then he said he saw Linda near the storage closet yesterday afternoon around the time my card supposedly got swiped. He was dropping off some filters, and he noticed her standing by the key cabinet with her phone out like she was taking pictures of something. He did not think much of it at the time, but now he said it felt weird. I asked if he would be willing to say that in writing, and he said yeah, but he was leaving town tonight for a job in Charlotte and would not be back until Monday. That gave me a tight window. I needed his statement before he left. I drove over to Marcus's place that evening, and he wrote out a short statement saying he saw Linda Carver in the clubhouse storage area alone on Tuesday afternoon around 3 p.m. He signed it, and I took a photo of it with my phone. Then I went home and started pulling together my own timeline. I had a vendor invoice from Tuesday showing I was at a supply yard across town at 2:45, and I had a text exchange with the vendor at 3:10 confirming the order. I printed everything and put it in a folder. Thursday morning I went to the management office and asked to file an appeal. The receptionist gave me a form and told me to fill it out and return it by Friday. I filled it out right there, attached my documents, and handed it back. She said she would forward it to the board. I asked when I would hear back, and she said the board meets once a month, and the next meeting was not until the end of March, 3 weeks away. I said I needed this resolved faster because Linda was threatening to block my deliveries and I have a medical shipment coming. The receptionist looked uncomfortable and said she could not override board procedures, but she would flag it as urgent. Friday afternoon I got an email from Linda. It said my appeal was invalid because I did not include a notarized witness affidavit as required by Section 12.4 of the community bylaws. I pulled up the bylaws PDF and searched for Section 12.4. It was about pool access violations. There was no Section 12.4 about appeals. I called the management office and asked to speak to someone about the email. They transferred me to a compliance coordinator named Janet, who said she was not familiar with that requirement and would have to check with the board. I asked if Linda Carver wrote that email herself, and Janet paused, then said yes. Board correspondence comes directly from the president. I said the section she cited does not exist, and Janet said she would look into it and get back to me. I never heard back. Saturday morning, I woke up to a bright orange warning tag on my windshield. It said my vehicle was parked in violation of guest parking rules and would be towed within 24 hours if not moved to a resident spot. My truck was in my assigned spot. I took a photo of the tag and the parking number stenciled on the curb. Then I walked over to the clubhouse to find out what was going on. Linda was there in the lobby talking to a couple of other board members. When she saw me, she said, "Oh good, you are here. We need to talk." She pulled me aside and said the board reviewed my appeal and determined it was incomplete, so the original complaint stood. She said the forms I allegedly took were worth approximately $200 to replace, and the board was assessing that cost to my account plus a $50 administrative fee. I said I did not take any forms and I have proof I was not even here when it happened. She said, "Your camera does not matter, my minutes are the truth." I asked what she meant by my camera, and she said she assumed I had doorbell footage or something. I did not correct her. She handed me a printed notice on HOA letterhead saying I had 10 days to pay the $250, or my account would be sent to collections and my access privileges would be suspended. I asked what access privileges, and she said my key card, my gate remote, and my parking decal. I said that would make it impossible for me to do my job here, and she said I should have thought of that before I took property that did not belong to me. One of the other board members, an older guy named Ron, looked uncomfortable and said maybe they should wait for the management company to review the evidence before assessing fees. Linda snapped at him and said the evidence was clear and the board had already voted. Ron did not push back. I left with the notice in my hand and my chest tight with anger. Monday morning, my medical supply shipment was supposed to arrive. I got a notification that it was delivered to the package locker at the mailbox cluster. When I went to pick it up, Linda was standing there with her phone out, filming me. She said, "I am documenting this for the record because you are not allowed to accept misdelivered packages without reporting to me first." I said it was not misdelivered, it was addressed to me, and I have the tracking number. She said all packages go through the board for approval during an active investigation. I said that was not a real rule, and she said it was as of this morning. She stepped between me and the locker and told me to step back. I did not move. She raised her phone closer to my face, inches away, and said she was calling security. I pulled out my own phone and started recording. She immediately changed her tone and said I was harassing her and she was going to file a restraining order. I said I was just picking up my package and she was the one blocking me. A neighbor walking by, a woman named Claire, stopped and asked if everything was okay. Linda spun around and said I was being aggressive and refusing to follow community rules. Claire looked at me, looked at Linda, and said it did not look like that to her. Linda ignored her and pulled out a handheld radio, the kind you get at a hardware store, and started talking into it like she was dispatch. She said, "Security, I need assistance at the mailbox cluster. We have a resident refusing to comply." There was no response. She repeated it. Still nothing. Claire said, "I do not think that thing is even on." Linda shot her a look and said, "This does not concern you." Claire pulled out her phone and said, "I am recording too, just so everyone is clear." Linda lowered the radio and said she was going to report both of us for intimidation. Then she stepped aside and said I could take my package, but she was filing an incident report. I opened the locker, grabbed my box, and walked away without saying anything else. My hands were shaking. That afternoon, I got an email from Janet at the management office saying the board had requested a formal hearing for the following Wednesday and my attendance was mandatory. The email included a PDF agenda that listed my name under disciplinary matters and said the board would be reviewing evidence of theft and access control violations. I forwarded the email to Marcus and asked if he was back yet. He said he just got home and he would come to the hearing with me if I needed backup. Tuesday, I went to the clubhouse to look at the security log myself. I asked the front desk attendant, a young guy named Eric, if I could see the access log for last week. He said he could not give me a copy, but I could look at it on the screen. He pulled it up and I saw my card number listed for Tuesday at 3:02 p.m. I asked if there was any other data like a photo or a timestamp location, and he said the system only logs the card number and time, no photos. I asked if someone could use a card that did not belong to them, and he said technically yes, if they had physical access to the card, but that would be a serious policy violation. I asked if anyone else had access to my card, and he said no, unless I left it somewhere or someone copied it. I thanked him and left. On my way out, I saw Linda talking to a woman I did not recognize near the pool gate. The woman was wearing a shirt with a security company logo. Linda was pointing at something on her clipboard and the woman was nodding. I did not stop. Wednesday morning, I showed up to the hearing 15 minutes early. It was in the clubhouse meeting room. Linda was already there, setting up a laptop and a projector. Ron and 2 other board members were sitting at a table in the front. Marcus came in a few minutes later and sat next to me in the back row. Linda started the meeting by reading a statement. She said the board took theft and policy violations very seriously, and today's hearing was to determine whether I had removed community property without authorization. She said the evidence included the access log, the missing forms, and my refusal to cooperate with the investigation. I raised my hand and said I had been cooperating the whole time, and I brought evidence showing I was not here when the alleged theft happened. She said I would have my turn to speak, but the board needed to review the case first. Then she pulled up a slide on the projector. It was a photo of the storage room shelf where the forms were supposed to be. The shelf was empty. She said the forms were last inventoried 2 weeks ago, and the next inventory check showed them missing. She said the only access log entry between those 2 dates was mine. I stood up and said I was off-site that afternoon and I had proof. I held up my folder with the vendor invoice and the text screenshots. Linda said I could submit those for the record, but the board would need time to verify them. I said I also had a witness who saw her in the storage room at the same time. Marcus stood up and said he saw Linda Carver alone in the storage area on Tuesday around 3 p.m., and he wrote a statement about it. Linda's face went red. She said Marcus was lying to cover for me because we were friends. Marcus said he was just telling the truth, and he had no reason to lie. Ron asked if Marcus would be willing to sign his statement under penalty of perjury, and Marcus said he already signed it, and he had a copy on his phone. Linda said witness statements were not admissible without board approval, and the board had not approved Marcus as a witness. Ron looked confused and said he did not remember any rule about pre-approving witnesses. Linda ignored him and said the hearing was about my actions, not hers, and if I wanted to make accusations, I needed to file a separate complaint. I said that was exactly what I was going to do. She moved on to the next slide. It was a printed copy of 2 complaint forms side by side. She said these were examples of the forms that were taken and the board had to reorder them at significant expense. I looked closely at the 2 forms on the screen. They were identical. Same layout, same blank fields, same tiny print at the bottom. I asked if I could see the originals and she said they were not available because they were in use. I asked how she knew the forms were taken if the originals were not available, and she said the inventory log showed a discrepancy. I asked to see the inventory log and she said it was confidential board property. Ron said he thought the inventory log should be part of the evidence if it was being used to support the accusation. Linda snapped at him and said the board did not need to disclose internal documents during a disciplinary hearing. Ron looked at the other 2 board members and one of them, a quiet woman named Susan, said she agreed with Ron and thought the log should be available for review. Linda said she would provide a redacted version after the hearing. I asked if I could speak. Linda said I had 5 minutes. I stood up and explained that I was not at the clubhouse on Tuesday afternoon. I was at a supply yard across town, and I had a time-stamped invoice and text messages to prove it. I said the access log might show my card number, but that did not mean I was the one who used it. I said someone could have copied my card or used a lost card that had not been deactivated. I said Marcus saw Linda in the storage room at the exact time my card was supposedly swiped, and that raised serious questions about who actually took the forms. Linda interrupted and said I was deflecting and making baseless accusations. I said I was presenting evidence and asking reasonable questions. She said the evidence was circumstantial and the board did not operate on conspiracy theories. Ron said he did not think it was a conspiracy theory to suggest that someone else might have used the card. Linda said the hearing was over and the board would deliberate and issue a decision within 10 business days. I said I needed a faster resolution because my deliveries were being blocked and my parking was being threatened. She said those were separate enforcement actions and the board would not discuss them during a theft hearing. Marcus and I left the meeting. He said Linda was clearly hiding something and I should go to the management company directly. I said I already tried that and they told me to work through the board. He said I should try again and push harder. That afternoon, I drove to the management office and asked to speak to a supervisor. Janet, the compliance coordinator, came out and said she heard about the hearing and she was sorry it did not go well. I said I needed someone from management to review the evidence because the board was stonewalling. She said management could not override the board on internal disciplinary matters, but they could review procedural complaints. I asked what that meant, and she said if I thought the board violated their own bylaws or acted in bad faith, I could file a complaint with management, and they would investigate. I said I wanted to file that complaint right now. She gave me another form and I filled it out on the spot, attaching copies of everything I brought to the hearing plus Marcus's statement. She said she would forward it to the regional manager and I should hear back within a week. Thursday morning I got a voicemail from Linda. She said the board had reviewed my appeal and determined that I owed the full $250 plus an additional $100 fine for disrupting the hearing and making false accusations against a board member. She said I now had 7 days to pay or my access would be suspended and my account would go to collections. She also said she was recommending to the board that my maintenance contract be reviewed for possible termination due to conduct violations. I listened to the message twice to make sure I heard it right. She was threatening my job now. I called Marcus and told him what she said. He said he knew a guy who worked for the security company that handled the gate cameras and he could ask if there was any footage from Tuesday. I said that would be huge. He said he would reach out. Friday afternoon, Marcus called me back. He said his contact pulled the footage and there was a clip from Tuesday at 2:58 p.m. showing Linda walking into the clubhouse side entrance alone. The camera did not cover the storage room itself, but it showed her going in and coming out 6 minutes later carrying a large shopping bag that looked full. He said his contact could not give me the footage directly, but he could confirm it existed and suggest I file a formal request through management. I asked if the contact would be willing to say that in writing, and Marcus said probably not because it could cost him his job, but he would be willing to talk to management off the record if they asked. I thanked him and immediately drove back to the management office. Janet was there, and I told her about the footage. She said she would add it to my complaint file and request the footage from the security company. She also said the regional manager wanted to meet with me Monday morning to go over everything. Saturday morning I woke up to another orange warning tag on my windshield, this time saying my truck was parked illegally in a fire lane. It was still in my assigned spot. I took another photo and added it to my growing folder of evidence. I also noticed my gate remote was not working. I tried it 3 times and the gate did not open. I had to use the call box and wait for someone to buzz me in. When I got home, I checked my mailbox and there was a letter from the HOA saying my gate access had been suspended pending resolution of outstanding fees. The letter was dated Thursday, the day after the hearing. I called the management office and left a message for Janet saying my access had been suspended, even though I had not been given the required 10-day notice per the bylaws. No one called me back. Sunday, I decided to check the bylaws myself for any reference to the access log system and how cards were managed. I found a section that said all access cards must be registered to a specific resident, and any lost or stolen cards must be reported immediately for deactivation. It also said the board must maintain a log of all card deactivations and replacements. I wondered if anyone had reported a lost card recently. Monday morning I met with the regional manager, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia. She had my complaint file open on her desk along with a printed copy of the access log and the security footage request. She said she reviewed everything and she had some concerns about how the board handled the hearing. She said the board was within their rights to hold a disciplinary hearing, but they were required to provide me with copies of all evidence before the hearing, which they did not do. She also said the board could not suspend my access without following the proper notice procedures. She said she was going to order the board to reinstate my access immediately and put the fee assessment on hold pending a full investigation. I asked what would happen to Linda, and she said that depended on what the investigation found. If the evidence showed she acted improperly, the management company could recommend sanctions or removal, but that decision would ultimately be up to the board and the homeowners. She said the security footage would be key and she was putting in an urgent request for it. I asked how long that would take and she said usually a few days. She also said she noticed something odd when she reviewed the access log. She pulled out a printout and showed me the entry for my card on Tuesday at 3:02 p.m. Then she showed me another entry for the same card number on the same day at 2:15 p.m. at a different location, the pool gate. She said if that was my card, I would have had to be in two places 14 minutes apart, which was possible but tight. She asked if I was at the pool that afternoon and I said no, I was off-site all day. She said that suggested someone else was using my card, which would be a serious violation. She said she was going to pull the footage from the pool gate camera too. I left the meeting feeling like I finally had someone on my side. Tuesday afternoon, Patricia called and said the security company sent over the footage. She said the clubhouse entrance video clearly showed Linda entering alone at 2:58 p.m. and leaving at 3:04 p.m. with a large shopping bag. She said the pool gate video showed Linda swiping a card at 2:15 p.m. She asked if I had ever given Linda my access card, and I said absolutely not. She said the card used at the pool gate was registered to my account, which meant either I was there or someone cloned my card. She said cloning an access card was not easy, but it was possible with the right equipment. She said she was going to confront Linda with the footage and ask for an explanation. Wednesday morning, Patricia called me again. She said she met with Linda and showed her the footage. Linda initially denied it was her in the video, then claimed she was checking the storage room for a maintenance issue and the shopping bag was full of pool towels, not forms. Patricia asked why she used my access card at the pool gate, and Linda said she did not, she used her own card. Patricia said the log showed my card number and Linda said the log must be wrong. Patricia said she was going to have the card system audited, and if it turned out Linda had been using my card or cloning cards, that would be grounds for immediate removal and possible criminal charges. Linda apparently got very angry and said Patricia was overstepping her authority and the board would be filing a complaint against the management company. Patricia said she told Linda the management company had the authority to investigate fraud and policy violations regardless of what the board thought. Thursday, I got a text from Marcus saying he heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Linda was telling people I was harassing her and she was planning to get a restraining order. I told him I had not contacted her at all except during official board business, and everything was documented. He said he knew, but she was trying to spin the narrative before the investigation results came out. I said I was going to stay quiet and let Patricia do her job. That afternoon, I got an email from Linda with the subject line "Community Safety Concern." The email said that due to ongoing behavioral issues, I was being asked to avoid all common areas except for necessary maintenance work, and any violation would be considered trespassing. The email was copied to the entire board and the management company. I forwarded it to Patricia immediately. She called me 10 minutes later and said Linda had no authority to issue a trespass warning, and the email was evidence of retaliation. She said she was going to send Linda a formal cease and desist letter. Friday morning, I went to the clubhouse to do a routine filter change in the HVAC room. When I walked in, Linda was standing in the lobby talking to a deputy sheriff. She pointed at me and said, "That is him. He is the one I told you about." The deputy walked over and asked for my ID. I gave it to him and asked what this was about. He said he was responding to a complaint about harassment and trespassing. I said I work here and I was just doing my job. Linda said I was banned from common areas and I was violating the ban by being here. The deputy looked at her and said he did not see any posted notice about a ban. She pulled out a printed copy of the email she sent me and handed it to him. He read it and said, "Ma'am, this email does not constitute a legal trespass notice, and if he works here, he has a right to be here for work purposes." Linda said the board had the authority to restrict access and the deputy was obligated to enforce it. He said, "No, ma'am, that is not how this works. If you want to pursue a civil trespass action, you need to go through the court, but I am not going to remove him based on an email." Linda's face turned red and she said she was going to call his supervisor. The deputy said, "You are welcome to do that," and he handed me back my ID and walked out. Linda turned to me and said, "This is not over." I said, "I know, and I am looking forward to the investigation results." She said, "What investigation?" I said, "The one Patricia is doing into the access log and the security footage." Her face went pale. She said Patricia had no authority to investigate the board, and I said, "Actually, she does, and you are going to find that out very soon." She did not say anything else. She just walked past me and out the front door. I went to the HVAC room, changed the filter, and left. That afternoon, Patricia called and said the card system audit was complete, and it confirmed that my card was used at the pool gate on Tuesday afternoon at 2:15 p.m. by someone who was not me. The audit also showed that Linda had checked out a blank card programmer from the security office 2 weeks earlier and never returned it. Patricia said that was enough evidence to recommend Linda's immediate suspension from the board pending a full hearing. She said she was presenting the findings to the board at an emergency meeting Monday morning. Over the weekend, I got 3 more emails from Linda, all with increasingly desperate subject lines. The first one said Patricia was conducting an illegal investigation and violating board confidentiality. The second one said I was conspiring with management to stage a coup against the elected board. The third one said she was calling an emergency homeowner meeting to expose the corruption. I did not respond to any of them. Monday morning, I showed up to the emergency board meeting. The room was packed with homeowners who had heard about the drama. Patricia was there with a lawyer from the management company. Linda was sitting at the board table looking like she had not slept. Patricia stood up and presented her findings. She showed the security footage of Linda entering the clubhouse with the shopping bag. She showed the access log entries for my card at 2 locations 14 minutes apart. She showed the equipment checkout log with Linda's signature next to the card programmer. She said the evidence strongly suggested that Linda had cloned my access card, used it to enter the storage room and taken the blank violation forms herself, then attempted to frame me for the theft in order to cover her tracks and deflect suspicion. Linda stood up and said it was all circumstantial and Patricia was making assumptions. Patricia said, "The assumptions are supported by multiple pieces of evidence, including your own checkout signature, and the fact that you accused this man of theft the day after you used his card." One of the homeowners in the audience, a guy I recognized from the pool, raised his hand and said, "If she cloned his card, what else has she cloned?" Another woman said, "How do we know she has not been using our cards too?" The room started buzzing with angry voices. Ron said he thought the board needed to vote on whether to suspend Linda pending a full investigation. Susan agreed. Linda said the board did not have the authority to suspend a sitting president without a homeowner vote. The lawyer stood up and said, "Actually, under your own bylaws, the board can suspend any member for cause with a majority vote, and this qualifies as cause." Ron called for a vote. Linda said it was illegal and she was not going to participate. Ron said her participation was not required. The vote was 3-1 in favor of suspension. Linda was out. The room erupted in applause. Linda grabbed her clipboard and her bag and stormed toward the door. On her way out, she stopped next to me and said, "You think you won, but this is not over." I said, "Yeah, it is." She walked out and I never saw her at another board meeting again. Patricia came over and said the management company was going to issue a formal apology to me and refund any fees or penalties that had been assessed. She also said the board was going to update the access control rules and require better tracking of card programmers and admin tools. I thanked her and said I appreciated her taking it seriously. She said fraud is always serious, and we do not tolerate retaliation. The new board president, Ron, came over and apologized on behalf of the board. He said they had no idea Linda was doing any of this and they should have asked more questions during the hearing. I said I understood, and I just wanted to move on. A week later, I got a letter from the HOA saying my access had been fully reinstated, all fees had been refunded, and the board was issuing a written correction to the record stating that I was not responsible for any theft or policy violation. The letter was signed by Ron and included an apology. I also got a call from Patricia saying the security company found the missing blank violation forms in a storage bin in Linda's garage during a follow-up investigation. Apparently, Linda had been taking office supplies and small items for months, using cloned cards to avoid detection, and she panicked when the inventory discrepancy was discovered. She tried to frame me because my card was easy to clone and I had legitimate access to the storage areas. Patricia said the HOA was considering pursuing criminal charges, but Linda agreed to resign from the board, pay restitution for all stolen items, and never hold a board position again. The HOA accepted the deal to avoid the cost and publicity of a trial. I ran into Marcus at the mailbox cluster a few days later and he asked how it all turned out. I told him about the meeting and the letter and Linda's resignation. He laughed and said he could not believe she was that reckless. I said, I think she thought she was untouchable because she had been president for so long and no one ever questioned her. He said, well, she questioned the wrong guy. I said I just got lucky that Patricia was willing to dig into it. He said, no, you did the work. You kept records, you asked the right questions, and you did not back down. I appreciated that. A neighbor walking by, Claire, the woman who stood up for me at the package locker, stopped and said she heard what happened and she was glad it worked out. She said Linda had been a problem for years and everyone was too afraid to challenge her. She said, now maybe the board will actually listen to people instead of just threatening them. I said I hoped so. The following month I was at the clubhouse again doing a routine inspection when a new board member, a younger woman named Angela, who just got elected, came over and introduced herself. She said she heard about what happened with Linda and she wanted to make sure I felt supported. She said the board was implementing new policies to prevent abuse of access systems and they were going to require quarterly audits of all admin tools. She also said they were going to start recording board meetings so there was a public record of decisions. I said that sounded like a good step. She said, we want this to be a place where people feel safe and respected, not bullied and accused. I said I appreciated that and I was glad to see the board taking it seriously. A couple weeks later, I got a message from Patricia saying the management company was updating their training for board members to include sections on ethics, evidence handling, and retaliation. She said my case was going to be used as an example of how not to handle a disciplinary matter. She said she hoped I did not mind, and I said I did not, if it helped prevent this from happening to someone else. She said that is the goal. We want to make sure boards understand they have power, but that power comes with accountability. I said I wished more boards understood that from the start. She said, unfortunately, some people only learn through consequences. I agreed. One afternoon I was at the pool fixing a busted gate latch when the pool attendant, a college kid named Jordan, came over and said he heard about the whole thing with Linda. He said I always thought she was weird, but I did not know she was actually stealing stuff. I said, yeah, it was a whole mess. He said, I saw her in the storage closet a bunch of times last year and she always acted super defensive if anyone came near. I wish I had said something. I said, you did not know, and honestly, no one would have believed it until there was proof. He said, well, I am glad you got proof. I said, me too. He asked if I was worried about backlash from her supporters, and I said there were not many left after the evidence came out. He said, good, because she does not run the gate, and people are tired of being pushed around. That weekend I was at home when I got a knock on the door. It was Ron, the new board president. He said he wanted to follow up in person and make sure there were no lingering issues. I invited him in and we sat in the living room. He said the board reviewed the entire case and they were embarrassed by how it was handled. He said Linda had been operating with very little oversight for years and the rest of the board just assumed she knew what she was doing. He said, "We should have asked more questions, and we should have listened to you from the start." I said, "I appreciate that, and I hope this changes how the board operates going forward." He said it already has. He said they implemented a rule that no single board member can issue fines or suspensions without a majority vote, and all disciplinary actions have to be documented and shared with management within 24 hours. He said, "We also voted to make all access logs available to homeowners on request, so there is transparency." I said that was a big improvement. He said, "We learned the hard way." Before he left, he handed me an envelope. He said it was a formal statement from the board acknowledging that I was falsely accused and that the board failed to follow proper procedures during the hearing. He said, "We wanted to put it in writing so there is no ambiguity." I opened the envelope and read the letter. It was clear, direct, and apologetic. I thanked him and said it meant a lot. He said, "You did not deserve any of this, and we are going to do better." A month later, I was at the clubhouse office dropping off a maintenance report when I saw Linda's name come up in conversation. Two homeowners were talking in the lobby, and one of them said she heard Linda moved out of Sunset Ridge entirely. The other one said, "Good riddance, she made this place miserable for everyone." I did not say anything, but I felt a sense of relief. The neighborhood felt calmer without her. The new board was more transparent, more responsive, and actually seemed interested in solving problems instead of creating them. I still had my job, my access was fully restored, and my reputation was cleared. It took months, but I got my name back and Linda lost everything she spent years building. Looking back, the whole situation was surreal. Linda had convinced herself that she could control the narrative and intimidate me into silence. But she underestimated how much damage she did to her own credibility by moving the goalposts, ignoring evidence, and retaliating so blatantly. The moment she said, "Your camera does not matter, my minutes are the truth," she set herself up for failure, because the truth does not care about anyone's version of the minutes. The evidence was the evidence, and once Patricia started pulling the threads, the whole thing unraveled fast. The access log, the security footage, the card programmer checkout, and Marcus's witness statement all pointed in the same direction, and Linda had no way to explain it without admitting she lied. The thing that stuck with me the most was the moment in the management office lobby when Patricia confronted Linda with the footage, and Linda's face went from smug confidence to panic in about 2 seconds. That was the moment I knew it was over. She had been so certain she could bluff her way through, but once the timeline was proven false with timestamps and multiple witnesses, there was no way out. The HOA was forced to update access control rules after the key mess was exposed, and Linda's attempt to frame me for her own theft became the example of what not to do in every training session going forward. It was not the revenge I planned, but it was the revenge I got, and it was lawful, documented, and absolutely humiliating for her in the most public way possible. The funny karma moment came later when I found out that Linda had recorded herself during one of our confrontations at the mailbox cluster, thinking it would protect her if I filed a complaint. But in that recording, she repeated the threat to block my deliveries and intercept my packages, which is a federal crime if you are not the intended recipient. When Patricia reviewed the recording as part of the investigation, she flagged it for potential mail tampering and forwarded it to the postal inspector. Linda never got charged because she never actually intercepted a package, but the fact that her own recording was used against her was the perfect full-circle moment. She thought she was building a case against me, but she was really building a case against herself. In the end, a witness statement that was recorded calmly and could not be twisted became the payback vector that dismantled Linda's entire strategy. Marcus's statement, combined with the vendor invoice, the text exchange, and the security footage, created a timeline that Linda could not argue with. Her attempt to force a public confession in exchange for dropping fees backfired spectacularly when the public saw the evidence and turned on her instead. The final humiliation moment, when management handed me the written correction while Karen watched, was quiet, but devastating. She did not scream or storm out that time. She just stood there, frozen, realizing that the power she thought she had was gone and everyone knew she was the thief. Not me. The HOA is a different place now. The board is more careful, the rules are clearer, and the access system is audited regularly. I still do maintenance work here, and people treat me with respect instead of suspicion. Linda is gone, and the neighborhood is better for it. I learned that standing up to bullies, even HOA bullies, is worth it if you have the patience to gather evidence and the courage to push back when they move the goalposts. It is exhausting, it is stressful, and it is infuriating, but when the truth comes out and the bully loses everything, it is also incredibly satisfying. I will see you in the next story.